Welcome, dear readers, to a story that transcends time. Today I invite you to immerse yourselves in the mists of Yorkshire, where honour and rebellion dance between walls of ancient stone. Can love be born from punishment? Can humiliation transform into dignity? Join me on this journey, where an aristocratic lady and an artisan blacksmith will defy the rules of their era. But before we begin, I would love to get to know you better. From what beautiful corner of the world are you joining us today? Comment below your country or city. It's wonderful to know that we share these stories without borders. And if this narrative touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and leave that like mites that so encourages us to continue creating these tales that nourish the soul. Yorkshire, England, year 1841. In the misty moors of northern England, where millennial stones guard secrets and the wind whispers forgotten stories, a destiny was beginning to be written that would forever change the understanding of love and human dignity. The flames danced in the fireplace of Hartwell Manor like restless souls seeking redemption. Lady Catherine Hartwell contemplated the fire from her worn velvet chair, while the echo of her own voice still resonated in the halls. "No, my lord. My answer is final." The silence that followed was more devastating than any Yorkshire storm. Count Edmund Hartwell's eyes hardened like forged iron, and in them Catherine could read her sentence before the paternal words escaped his lips. "Then you will learn what obedience means," murmured the Count, with a coldness that froze the air in the salon. Lord Pemberton had departed with wounded dignity, and the promise of revenge gleaming in his gaze. Catherine knew she had crossed an invisible but implacable line. Her rejection was not merely a matrimonial refusal, it was a challenge to the established order, a crack in the wall of conventions that sustained her world. Rain began to strike the leaded windows, as if the sky wept for what was to come. Mrs. Davies, her faithful governess, approached with soft steps, carrying a tea tray that no one would drink. "My lady," whispered the elderly woman, "perhaps it would be prudent to consider." But Catherine raised a delicate hand, silencing the words they both knew were useless. Her green eyes lost themselves in the flames, where she thought she saw her mother's face, dead when she was barely 12 years old. What would Lady Margaret Hartwell have done in her place? The salon door opened with an ominous creak. The Count returned, and on his face was drawn a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Catherine," he said with terrible calm, "I have made a decision that I hope will teach you the value of family and obedience. Tomorrow at dawn you will contract marriage." Catherine's heart stopped for an instant. "Marriage, but father, if I have rejected Lord Pemberton—" "Not with Pemberton," the Count interrupted, savouring each word like bitter wine. "With William Fletcher, the village blacksmith. Thus you will learn what it means to reject a gentleman on a whim." The silence extended like a cold shadow. Mrs. Davies dropped the porcelain cup, which shattered against the marble floor. The sound of crystal breaking seemed the echo of a heart breaking. Catherine felt the world swaying beneath her feet. A blacksmith, a man whose hands worked iron and fire, whose world was foreign to golden salons and conversations in French. The humiliation was perfect, calculated to break her proud spirit. But while the flames continued dancing in the fireplace, something gleamed in Catherine's eyes. It wasn't tears that appeared, but something more dangerous. Determination. "As you wish, father," she said with a voice so serene that the Count frowned, disconcerted by the absence of pleas or tears. How could Count Edmund know that he had just sealed not his victory, but the beginning of the most extraordinary transformation that Yorkshire would witness? Dawn arrived wrapped in mist, as if nature itself wanted to hide the ceremony about to be celebrated. The small parish church of Hartwell seemed like a stone ship navigating in a sea of fog, its bells silent on this morning that would change two destinies forever. Catherine contemplated herself in the beveled mirror of her dressing table. The navy blue dress she had chosen was not the wedding gown she had dreamed of as a child, but its simplicity had an austere dignity that seemed appropriate for this singular marriage. Mrs. Davies had braided her chestnut hair in a low crown, adorned only with a small wild flower that the old woman had found in the garden. "My lady," murmured Mrs. Davies with a broken voice, "we are still in time to—" "No," Catherine interrupted softly, adjusting the lace gloves that had belonged to her mother. "What must be, will be." The family carriage conducted her along the cobblestone path toward the church, where only two witnesses waited. The vicar, Mr. Whitmore and a tall man Catherine had not seen before. He must be some relative of the groom, she thought, while nervousness began to nest in her stomach. William Fletcher waited beside the altar with a solemnity that surprised Catherine. He was not the coarse and muddy man she had imagined. He wore a dark suit that, though simple, fit him with natural elegance. His hands, large and long-fingered, were scrupulously clean, and when he turned to look at her, Catherine encountered eyes blue as tempered steel. The vicar began the ceremony with a trembling voice, clearly uncomfortable with the circumstances. The ritual words floated in the cold air of the church, mixing with the smell of incense and ancient wood. Catherine responded with a firm voice, surprising herself with the serenity that filled her. When the moment for vows came, William turned toward her completely. His voice, deep and warm, filled the sacred space. "Catherine Hartwell, I promise to honor and protect you, not as my property, but as my companion." The words were simple, but in them there was something that made Catherine raise her eyes to him with new curiosity. This man did not speak, as she expected a village blacksmith would. When the rings were exchanged, two simple silver bands that William had forged that very dawn, Catherine felt the weight of the warm metal on her finger like a promise whose meaning she did not yet understand. "You may kiss the bride," announced the vicar with evident haste. William approached with measured movements, and his lips barely brushed Catherine's cheek, a gesture so delicate that she felt strangely moved by his consideration. Upon leaving the church, the sun had partially dissipated the mist, creating golden beams that filtered through the leaves of the centennial oaks. William helped Catherine mount a simple but solid cart pulled by a chestnut mare with sweet eyes. "Where are we going?" asked Catherine, conscious that her previous life had ended forever at that stone altar. "Home," William replied simply, taking the reins. The house turned out to be a surprise that would leave Catherine speechless for the rest of the day. It was not the humble cabin she had imagined, but a two-story grey stone construction with leaded windows and a tended garden that spoke of dedicated hands and a sensitive heart. Adjacent to the house, a well-equipped forge where fire slept like a domestic dragon. What other secrets did this man hide, whom destiny had placed in her path? The first week in the grey stone house passed wrapped in a strange dance of courtesies and silences. Catherine discovered that William had prepared the main room for her, while he installed himself in an alcove adjacent to the forge. The delicacy of this gesture did not go unnoticed by a woman raised among the subtleties of aristocracy. Mrs. Davies had insisted on accompanying her lady, installing herself in the small attic with a mixture of fierce loyalty and barely disguised curiosity. The old woman observed William's every movement with a critical eye, seeking any sign of rudeness or cruelty that would justify her fears. But what she found deeply disconcerted her. William awakened before dawn, not to hammer noisily in his forge, but to prepare the fire carefully and bring hot tea to the doors of both women before beginning his work. His manners at table were correct without being affected, and his conversation, though sparse, revealed an unexpected education. The morning of the 8th day, Catherine awakened to the sound of a different hammer. It was not the monotonous blow of iron against anvil, but something more delicate, almost musical. Curiosity overcame her, and she headed toward the forge covered with a wool shawl. What she saw left her breathless. William was not forging ordinary tools. His hands were shaping an iron rose, so delicate it seemed about to release its fragrance. Each petal had been hammered with infinite patience, curved and polished, until achieving a perfection that rivaled nature itself. Next to the rose, on an impeccably ordered work table, Catherine discovered a world she had never imagined. Candelabras with elegant lines, mirror frames with intertwined designs that seemed taken from medieval illuminated manuscripts, and what most amazed her, small animal sculptures so full of life that she expected to see them move at any moment. "Good morning, Lady Catherine," said William without turning, conscious of her presence from the moment she had crossed the threshold. "This is extraordinary," murmured Catherine, approaching to contemplate an iron butterfly so delicate that its wings seemed diaphanous. William stopped his work and turned toward her. In his eyes was a mixture of pride and shyness that moved Catherine more than any grandiose speech. "My father taught me that iron serves not only for shoeing horses," he explained, cleaning his hands on a clean cloth. "He said that each material has a soul, and that the artisan's work is to free it. Was your father also a blacksmith? A shadow crossed William's face. He was a Methodist pastor, but before finding his religious vocation, he worked with a master goldsmith in Edinburgh. He taught me that hands can create beauty as much as destruction, and that the choice is always in us. Catherine approached more, studying the details of a small sculpture that represented a deer in jumping position. The grace captured in metal reminded her of the best pieces she had seen in London galleries. "Do you sell these works?" William nodded. "The wealthy landowners of neighbouring counties commissioned them for their houses. Lord Ashford asked me for a series of candelabras for his dining room. With what I earn from these special pieces, I'm saving to—" He stopped abruptly, as if he had revealed more than he intended. "For what?" asked Catherine with genuine curiosity. William looked at her for a long time, as if evaluating whether he could trust her. Finally, his shoulders relaxed. "To open a school, a place where village children can learn not only to read and write, but also trades that allow them to create beauty, not just survive." The words floated in the warm air of the forge like sparks from a bonfire. Catherine felt something stir within her, an emotion she had never experienced, genuine admiration for another human being's dream. Was it possible that her punishment was transforming into something completely unexpected? The discovery of William's artistic talent was only the first veil lifted. Soon, Catherine noticed other details that defied all her preconceptions about working-class men. One rainy afternoon, while Mrs. Davies prepared jam in the kitchen, Catherine took refuge in the small library of the house. She was surprised to find William there, bent over a thick book, using a cracked monocle that clearly caused him difficulties in focusing. The book was a treatise on Gothic architecture, written in Latin. "Do you read Latin?" asked Catherine, unable to hide her astonishment. William raised his eyes, and she noticed that his cheeks had colored slightly. "Very little," he admitted. "My father taught me the basics before dying, but these technical texts are challenging for me." Catherine approached, observing the pages full of complex diagrams and marginal notes written in careful but laborious handwriting. "Why do you study architecture?" "I want my school to be more than a classroom," William replied, closing the book carefully. "I want it to be a place that inspires, that elevates the spirit of those who enter it. I have seen too many schools that seem like prisons." Without thinking twice, Catherine sat beside him. "Would you allow me to help with the translation?" William looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. "I couldn't ask that of you, milady. You're not asking me, I'm offering it to you." And so began a routine that would transform their days. Each afternoon, after William finished his work in the forge, they would meet in the library. Catherine translated the most complex passages, explained technical terms, and gradually also began to teach him French. William proved to be an exceptional student. His mind absorbed knowledge with an avidity that reminded Catherine of her own years of education, when the world expanded before her with each new book. One night, while they worked together on a diagram of buttresses, William told her about his mother. "She was a seamstress," he said with a soft voice, "the most skilled in the county. She could create dresses that seemed like poetry-made fabric. She died when I was 15 in childbirth with my little sister." His hands stopped on the paper. "My sister only lived 3 days. I buried them together in the church cemetery, under an oak that my mother loved. Sometimes I think my love for creating beautiful things comes from her need to leave beauty in the world." Catherine felt an oppression in her chest. Loss, pain, loneliness. All of that she knew too. "My mother died when I was 12, she shared, surprising herself with how easily the words flowed from her lips. It was a winter day, and she had been embroidering by the window all morning. When I went to show her my own work, I found her asleep forever, with a smile on her lips. Their gazes met in the golden candlelight, and in that moment something changed between them. They were no longer the punished lady and the humiliating blacksmith. They were two souls who had known loss, and had chosen to create beauty despite it. "Catherine," William said softly, using her name without the title for the first time. "May I ask you something?" She nodded. "Why did you reject Lord Pemberton?" "It was an advantageous alliance for your family." Catherine remained silent for a moment, searching for the right words. "Because in his eyes I saw emptiness, where there should have been passion, calculation where there should have been kindness. I preferred uncertainty to a life of pretense. William nodded slowly. Then you don't regret being here? The question floated in the air like a delicate butterfly, awaiting response. What would Catherine answer when her heart had already begun to whisper truths that her mind was not yet ready to accept? The spring of 1841 came to Yorkshire laden with promises and secrets. With it also came the letters that Catherine had both feared and expected. The first surprised her during breakfast. Mrs. Davies brought it with a worried expression, recognizing the seal of Hartwell Manor, but noticing the feminine handwriting that adorned the envelope. Catherine opened it with trembling hands to discover that it did not come from her father, but from Lady Victoria Hartwell, the Count's new wife. My dear Catherine, I hope this letter finds you in good health and spirit. I know that the circumstances of your marriage were not of your choosing, but since my arrival at Hartwell Manor, I have observed with growing admiration the dignity with which you faced an impossible situation. I must confess that your father married me not for love, but for economic necessity. My dowry has temporarily saved the family finances, but I have come to understand that your rejection of Pemberton was wiser than he will ever acknowledge. I have made discreet inquiries about your husband. William Fletcher has an exceptional reputation not only as an artisan, but as a man of honor. The testimonies about his character are unanimous in their respect and admiration. I enclose a bank draft. It is not charity, but justice. These are the income from your minor properties, which by right belong to you. Your father intended to retain them as part of your punishment, but I will not allow it. With sincere affection and hope for your future, Victoria. Catherine reread the letter 3 times, unable to believe the generosity of a woman she barely knew. The bank draft represented more money than she had seen in years, enough to live comfortably for a long time. The second letter arrived that same afternoon, and its content deeply disturbed her. The paper was of the finest quality, the seal unmistakable. Lord Pemberton had not forgotten his humiliation. Lady Catherine Fletcher. How appropriate your new surname now seems, as vulgar as your new condition. I hope you enjoy your life among smoke and soot, married to a man whose hands can never be cleaned of the dirt of his work. However, do not think that your small victory will go unanswered. I have come to know certain aspects of your husband's character that I am sure you are unaware of. Men of his class have particular methods for educating their wives when they show themselves haughty. It will be interesting to observe how long you maintain that aristocratic dignity when you encounter the true disciplinary methods of the common people, with the contempt you deserve. Pemberton. Catherine crumpled the letter with fury, but the venomous words had planted a seed of unease in her mind. What if William had a hidden side? What if his gentleness was only a mask he would remove when they were completely alone? That night during dinner, she observed William with new attention. His hands, large and powerful, cut bread with precise movements. Those same hands that created beauty could also cause pain if he so decided. As if he had perceived her scrutiny, William raised his eyes. "Is something wrong, Catherine? You seem worried." The question was soft, but Catherine started involuntarily. William noticed immediately. "Have I done something that bothers you?" "No, I received letters today," Catherine managed to say, feeling ridiculous for her nervousness. William left his utensils on the table and looked at her with complete attention. "Bad news?" Catherine hesitated. She could lie, she could pretend everything was fine, but something in William's blue eyes, something in the way he waited for her response without pressuring her, made her choose honesty. "One of them was from Lord Pemberton. He suggests that you might be violent with me." The silence that followed was so profound that Catherine could hear the crackling of the fire in the fireplace. William remained motionless, and for a terrible moment, Catherine wondered if she had made a mistake in speaking. Then William rose slowly and headed toward a showcase where he kept some of his most delicate works. He took the iron rose that Catherine had admired on her first visit to the forge. He returned to the table and deposited the rose in front of her with infinite delicacy. "Catherine," he said with a calm but firm voice, "these hands have created this. They could never harm something as beautiful as you." The words resonated in the room like a silver bell, and Catherine felt something melt inside her. Was it possible that the man whose company she had begun to appreciate was exactly what he seemed to be? a noble soul trapped in a worker's body. The annual Yorkshire Fair arrived with May's splendor, transforming the communal meadow into a labyrinth of colors, aromas and sounds that awakened all the senses. Catherine had not attended a fair since her childhood, when her mother took her by the hand among the stalls of sweets and artisanal toys. William had worked for weeks preparing his most exquisite pieces for the exhibition. Catherine had observed him select each work with the care of a museum curator, polishing and repolishing until each surface reflected the perfection he visualized in his mind. The morning of the fair, Catherine awakened with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It would be the first time she appeared in public as Mrs. Fletcher, the first time she faced the gazes and murmurings of the society she had abandoned. She chose an emerald green silk dress, simple but elegant, and gathered her hair in a style that spoke of refinement without ostentation. When she descended the stairs, she found William waiting for her in the vestibule, dressed in his best dark suit. The look they exchanged was long and silent, charged with meanings that neither dared yet to verbalize. "You are beautiful," William said simply, and the words sounded more sincere than all the flowery compliments Catherine had heard in aristocratic salons. William's stall was located in a privileged position near the church, where the morning light bathed his works with golden luminosity. Catherine felt proud seeing how visitors stopped amazed before the iron sculptures, delicately touching the petals of the metallic roses as if they expected to find them moist with dew. An elegant man, middle-aged and distinguished bearing, approached the stall with determined step. Catherine immediately recognized the quality of his clothing. He was a gentleman from London, possibly a prosperous merchant. "Are you the artificer of these marvels?" he asked, addressing William with a mixture of respect and amazement. "Yes, sir," William replied with the modesty that Catherine had learned to admire. "Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I am Harold Whitman, owner of galleries on Bond Street. These pieces have a quality that rivals the best European masters." Catherine saw how William's eyes lit up, though his expression remained serene. "Would you be interested in an exclusive contract?" continued Mr. Whitman. "I could assure you a market in London, even Paris. Your works would find appreciators worthy of your talent." While William and the merchant discussed terms, Catherine noticed how other fair visitors approached, attracted by the conversation. Some recognized her, and murmurs began. "Isn't that Lady Catherine Hartwell? Now she's Mrs. Fletcher, the blacksmith's wife. What a terrible fall. From ballrooms to a village fair." Catherine kept her chin high, ignoring the comments. But when she saw Mrs. Pemberton, her rejected suitor's mother, approaching, she knew the real test was about to begin. "Dear Catherine," said the older woman with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "how interesting to see you here. I've been told that your new husband is quite a rustic artisan." Catherine felt the temptation to respond with sarcasm, but then noticed that William had interrupted his conversation with Mr. Whitman and was observing her with attention. In his eyes was not concern for himself, but for her, for how these words might hurt her. "Mrs. Pemberton," Catherine responded with a serene smile, "my husband is an artist. His works speak for themselves, as you can see." She delicately took one of the iron butterflies, holding it toward the light where its wings seemed to come alive. "You see, I have learned that true nobility is not inherited. It is created. William creates beauty with his hands, honor with his actions, and dignity with his character. Do you know many noble titles that can affirm the same?" The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Pemberton paled, stammered an excuse, and withdrew precipitously. When Catherine turned, she found William looking at her with an expression that stole her breath. It wasn't gratitude she saw in his eyes, but something much deeper and more dangerous. Was it possible that in that moment, at that fair full of strangers, they had begun to truly fall in love? The calm that followed the fair proved to be the prelude to a storm that threatened to destroy the fragile happiness that Catherine and William had begun to build. The rumors came like black ravens carried by venomous tongues and complacent ears. Lord Pemberton had fulfilled his threat with calculated cruelty that demonstrated to what extent personal humiliation could corrupt a man's soul. Mrs. Davies was the first to hear the murmurs in the village market. She returned home with a distraught face and trembling hands, carrying the purchases and a much heavier load of worry. "My lady," she whispered, finding Catherine in the garden where she tended the rose bushes that William had planted for her. "There are terrible rumors circulating in the village." Catherine raised her eyes from the flowers, immediately noticing the anguish in her faithful governess's eyes. "What kind of rumors?" "They say that Mr. Fletcher mistreats you, that he beats you when he's angry, that he locks you in your room, that—" "Mrs." Davies couldn't continue. The words choked in her throat. Catherine felt as if the ground was sinking beneath her feet. The cruelty of the attack left her breathless. Pemberton had chosen the most damaging calumny possible, one that would not only put William's reputation in doubt, but would make her an object of pity and distrust. Who is spreading these lies? Lord Pemberton's servants have been frequenting the taverns, telling horrible stories. They say you have been seen with bruises, that you startle when he approaches, that you cry in silence. That night, when William returned from delivering an order to a nearby farm, he found Catherine waiting for him in the study with an expression he had never seen on her face. "William," she said without preamble, "we must talk." He sat facing her, noting the tension that radiated from every line of her body. "Pemberton is spreading rumors that you mistreat me." The words fell between them like stones in a pond, creating ripples that extended in the silence. William said nothing for a long moment, but Catherine saw how his hands slowly closed into fists. "What kind of rumors?" he asked finally, and his voice sounded dangerously calm. Catherine related everything Mrs. Davies had heard, observing how William's jaw tensed with each detail. "Tomorrow I will go see him," William said when she finished. "To do what?" "To demand that he publicly retract those lies." Catherine leaned forward, taking William's hands in hers. They were warm hands, calloused from honest work, hands that had never caused her harm. "William, if you confront him, you'll only give credibility to his lies. He'll say you're violent, that you threatened him. It's exactly what he expects." "Then what do you propose? That we allow him to destroy our lives with calumnies?" Catherine remained silent, thinking. She knew men like Pemberton. She knew how his twisted mind worked. But she had also learned something in these months with William, that truth, when lived with authenticity, has a power that lies cannot touch. "I propose we do exactly the opposite of what he expects," she said finally, "that we go out together, that we show ourselves in public as the couple we are, that we let people see with their own eyes the truth of our marriage." William looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Catherine, that will mean facing hostility, stares, cruel comments. Are you willing to endure that for me?" The question floated in the air between them, charged with implications that went beyond simple defense against calumny. It was, Catherine realized, a question about commitment, about the conscious choice to be together, not by obligation but by will. "William," she said with a certainty that surprised her, "I am willing to face anything with you." Would the love beginning to flower between them be enough to resist the storm that Pemberton had unleashed? The following Sunday dawned clear and bright, as if nature had decided to provide the perfect setting for the drama about to unfold. Catherine dressed with special care, choosing a lavender walking suit that enhanced her complexion without being ostentatious. William waited for her in the vestibule, impeccably dressed, with a rose from his garden pinned to his lapel. When he offered her his arm, Catherine noticed that his hands trembled slightly. "Nervous?" she asked with a soft smile. "Terrified," he admitted honestly. "Not for me, but for what they might say to you." Catherine stopped and turned to look at him completely. "William Fletcher," she said with a firm voice, "I am a Hartwell. We have faced Vikings, Normans, and the War of the Roses. I think I can handle a few village gossips." The smile that illuminated William's face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. The walk to church was an exercise in dignity and determination. Catherine kept her head high and her step firm, conscious of the gazes that followed them, of the conversations that were interrupted at their passage, of the windows that opened to better observe the strange couple. In church, they sat in the pew that William habitually occupied, in the middle part of the nave. Catherine had deliberately chosen not to claim the Hartwell family pew in the front row, sending a clear message about where her loyalties lay. During the service, she was painfully conscious of the whispers, the furtive glances, the tension that filled the sacred air. But she also noticed other things. The way Mrs. Thompson, the baker's widow, smiled warmly when their eyes met. How young Dr. Morris respectfully inclined his head toward William. the way several village men seemed to create a protective circle around them, without words, but with clear intention. After the service, while the congregation slowly dispersed in the church courtyard, Lord Pemberton made his appearance. Catherine saw him approaching with that calculated smile she knew so well, flanked by two of his London friends who had come to spend the weekend. "Fletcher," said Pemberton with a voice loud enough for others to hear, "I hope you are treating your wife well. It would be terrible if a man of your temperament lost control." The silence that followed was so tense that Catherine could hear her own heartbeats. William straightened slowly, and Catherine saw how his shoulders squared, preparing for combat. But before he could respond, Catherine stepped forward. "Lord Pemberton," she said with a clear voice that carried to all corners of the courtyard, "what a coincidence to find you here. I was just commenting to my husband about the strange stories that circulate lately, stories about domestic violence, can you imagine?" Pemberton paled slightly, but maintained his venomous smile. "Stories often have basis in reality, dear Catherine." "Oh, I completely agree," Catherine replied, and her smile was as sharp as a dagger. "For example, the stories about your gambling debts in London clubs, or the stories about your tendency to bet money you don't possess. Or my favorite, the stories about a certain gentleman who was found crying on a moneylender's steps last week." Pemberton turned livid. "How dare you?" "I dare because, unlike you, I have nothing to hide," Catherine continued implacably. "My marriage is based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Can you say the same of your relationships, my lord, or do they continue to be all failed commercial transactions?" A murmur of approval spread among those present. Catherine saw how several faces that had shown doubt now expressed respect and even admiration. Pemberton, realizing he had lost the battle, muttered something about urgent matters and withdrew precipitously with his friends. When she turned toward William, Catherine found in his eyes something that made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't gratitude she saw there, but pure and undisguised love. "Catherine," he murmured, low enough so only she could hear, "you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known." And in that moment, in the courtyard of a small village church, with the gossips watching and the sun illuminating their faces, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that she had fallen in love with her husband. Could a marriage that had begun as punishment transform into the truest love story that Yorkshire had ever witnessed? The letter arrived on a morning in early June, when Catherine's garden bloomed in all its glory, and the air filled with the aroma of roses that William had planted with such care. The seal was unknown, but the formal handwriting of the sender suggested legal matters of importance. Catherine opened it with curiosity, not suspecting that it contained news that would change her life once more. "Esteemed Miss Hartwell, who followed the recent events of your life with great interest, has left the following dispositions in her will. To my great-niece Catherine, who has demonstrated having the courage that her generation lacked, I bequeath the totality of my property in Whitmore Vale, consisting of a manor house of 20 rooms, farmland and forests totaling 200 acres, as well as the sum of £3,000 sterling. Miss Hartwell also included a personal letter that I attached to this communication. Cordially, Mr. Fletcher. I have the honour to inform you that you have been a beneficiary of the will of your great-aunt, Miss Agatha Hartwell, deceased last month in Bath. Augustus Fairfax, solicitor." Catherine read the letter twice before its full meaning settled in her mind. £3,000, 200 acres, a manor house. In one stroke she had gone from being a punished wife to an independent woman with more than sufficient means to live as she desired. Her Aunt Agatha's personal letter was even more revealing. "My dear Catherine, you were always my favourite niece, though we barely saw each other in life. I had my own battles with social conventions, as you well know, and I never married because I never found a man worth renouncing my freedom for. But I have followed your story with growing admiration. Rejecting Pemberton was brave. Accepting the consequences of that decision was noble. But building a worthy life with William Fletcher, that, my dear, is extraordinary. I've made inquiries about your husband. An old spinster has her resources. He is a man of exceptional honour, genuine talent, and noble heart. You have found what I never could, a true companion. This inheritance is not for you to abandon your new life, but so you can live it on your own terms. Do with it what your heart dictates. With all my love and admiration, Aunt Agatha. P.S. If your father tries to claim any part of this inheritance, remind him that I know enough secrets about the Hartwells to ruin what remains of his reputation." Catherine remained seated in her favorite chair by the window, with the letters in her lap, trying to assimilate the magnitude of the change. She was free, truly free for the first time in her life. She could leave if she wanted. She could establish herself in Bath or London, live as an independent lady, perhaps find a suitor more in accordance with her education. The sound of William's hammer came from the forge, constant and comforting. Catherine raised her eyes toward the window facing the courtyard, where she could see him working, concentrated on his labor, oblivious to the news that had just changed her world. What would she do? What would William say when he found out? That night, during dinner, Catherine told him about the inheritance. She carefully observed his face while he read the letters, looking for any sign of greed, of calculation, of the changes that money so often provoked in people. What she saw both tranquilized and moved her. William read in silence, his eyebrows gradually rising, and when he finished, he leaned back in his chair with an expression of genuine amazement. "Catherine," he said finally, "this is wonderful. Now you can—" He stopped abruptly, as if he had begun to say something he shouldn't. "I can what?" William lowered his gaze to his hands. "You can choose your own life. You are no longer tied to the consequences of your father's punishment." The words floated in the air between them, charged with painful implications. Catherine felt a knot in her throat. "Is that what you think? That I'll leave now that I have means to do so?" William raised his eyes, and in them Catherine saw a fear that broke her heart. "I don't know what to think," he admitted. "I only know you deserve more than I can offer you. You always have." Catherine rose slowly and approached him. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Sir William Fletcher," she said with a firm voice, "haven't you understood yet that I love you?" The words escaped her lips before she could stop them, true and powerful, like a sacred confession. Would this declaration that had just changed everything between them forever be reciprocated? Catherine's words of love floated in the air like silver bells, transforming the room's silence into something sacred and eternal. William looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath, as if he were seeing a miracle unfold before his eyes. "Catherine," he whispered, raising his hands to cover hers, which still held his face. "Do you really—" "I love you," she repeated, and this time the words sounded firmer, more certain. "I love you for your kindness, for your talent, for the way you see beauty where others only see work. I love you for how you look at me, as if I were precious, not for my title or my dowry, but for who I really am." William rose slowly, without taking his gaze from her. His hands slid until they framed Catherine's face, and when he finally spoke, his voice trembled with emotion. "I have loved you since the day you defended yourself against Mrs. Pemberton at the fair. I have loved you for your courage, for your intelligence, for the way you transformed what should have been your punishment into our blessing." When their lips met, it was with the sweetness of a fulfilled promise and the passion of a long-contained love. Catherine felt all the walls she had built around her heart crumbling, leaving only the pure truth of her feelings. When they separated, both were smiling through tears. "Now," said Catherine, taking William's hands in hers, "let's talk about what we'll do with the inheritance. Catherine, it's your money, your property. You can do whatever you wish with all of it." "Our money," she corrected him firmly. "Our property. We are spouses, William, in all the ways that matter." William looked at her with a mixture of love and amazement that made Catherine's heart race. "What do you have in mind?" Catherine headed toward the desk and unfolded the papers she had been studying all afternoon. "The Whitmore Vale property is only 10 miles from here. The house is large enough to house a proper school, with dormitories for students from distant counties. The lands could include workshops for different trades, blacksmithing, carpentry, maybe even weaving and sewing." William's eyes lit up as he followed her explanations. "We could create something completely new," Catherine continued, excitement making her voice accelerate. "A school that teaches both letters and trades, that forms not just workers, but artisans, that doesn't separate students by social class, but unites them by their desire to learn." William approached the desk, studying the plans Catherine had been drawing. "Here could go the forges," he said, pointing to an area near a stream. "Water is essential for tempering metal. And this space would be perfect for carpentry workshops. with large windows for natural light. "Exactly," exclaimed Catherine. "And we could build a library, not just with academic books, but with technical manuals, art treatises, stories from different cultures. Students would learn that knowledge has no class limits." They spent hours planning, drawing, dreaming together. It was past midnight when they finally stopped, surrounded by papers covered with sketches and notes. "Do you know what's most extraordinary about all this?" said William, taking Catherine's hand. "What?" "6 months ago, your father thought he was punishing you by forcing you to marry me. He couldn't know he was creating the perfect partnership to change education in England." Catherine laughed, a clear and joyous laugh that filled the room. "Destiny has a very particular sense of humor," she agreed. "But now we have work to do. We have a school to build and a future to create." They kissed once more, sealing not only their love but their shared commitment to a dream that was bigger than both of them. As the moon rose over Yorkshire, illuminating the fields where soon the most innovative school in England would rise, Catherine and William savoured the sweet certainty that they had found not only love, but the purpose that would give meaning to their lives. Could two people in love really change the world, one young life at a time? Autumn painted Yorkshire with golden and scarlet tones, creating the perfect backdrop for the news that arrived through an exhausted servant from Hartwell Manor. Count Edmund Hartwell had fallen gravely ill, and in his feverish delirium he didn't stop pronouncing Catherine's name. The news came while Catherine and William supervised the first construction work at Whitmore Vale. Aunt Agatha's inheritance had been even more generous than expected, and they had already begun to give shape to their joint dream, a school that would combine classical education with artisanal training. Catherine received the message with mixed emotions. The man who had punished her so cruelly was the same who had raised her with affection after her mother's death. The stern father who had forced her marriage was also the man who had taught her to read Latin and appreciate music. "I must go see him," she told William that night, as they walked through the garden that had flourished under their shared care. "Are you sure?" he asked, stopping to look at her with concern. "It could be painful for you." Catherine contemplated the roses that William had planted for her, now robust and fragrant under the starry sky. "It might be painful," she admitted, "but it could also be necessary, for him and for me." The next day, they departed together toward Hartwell Manor. William had insisted on accompanying her, and Catherine felt grateful for his constant comforting presence, like an anchor in a storm. Hartwell Manor had changed dramatically. The gardens that Catherine remembered as impeccable showed signs of abandonment, and the house itself seemed to have shrunk, as if the weight of financial worries were physically crushing it. Lady Victoria received them in the main vestibule. Catherine was surprised to find in her stepmother a woman of natural elegance and kind eyes, very different from the evil stepmother she had imagined. "Catherine, dear," said Victoria, embracing her with sincere affection. "How glad I am that you came. And you must be Mr. Fletcher," she added, turning toward William with a warm smile. "Stories about your artistic talent have reached even here." She led them upstairs that Catherine knew by heart, but which now seemed strangely narrow and steep. The main bedroom, where she had once played with her mother's jewels, now housed a man who seemed to have aged a decade in a few months. Count Edmund was awake, contemplating the ceiling with glassy eyes. When he saw Catherine at the threshold, his eyes filled with tears. "Catherine," he murmured with a hoarse voice, "you came. I thought you would never want to see me again." Catherine slowly approached the bed, with William at her side, as a silent, protective presence. "I'm here, Father," she said simply. Edmund extended a trembling hand toward her, and after a moment of hesitation, Catherine took it in hers. "I have been a fool," began the Count with voice broken by emotion. "A proud and stubborn fool. I thought I knew what was best for you, but all I did was almost ruin your life. Father, no, let me speak, please. I may not have another chance." His eyes moved toward William. "Are you William Fletcher?" "Yes, my lord," William replied with respect but without civility. "I have made inquiries about you," said Edmund with a weak smile. "Oh yes, a ruined father still has his contacts. Lord Ashford wrote to me personally about your candelabras. He says they are the most exquisite pieces he has seen outside of Paris." William inclined his head modestly. "But more important than your talent," continued Edmund, "are the reports about your character. They say you are a man of honor, that you treat my daughter with respect and devotion, that you look at her as if she were a treasure, not a burden." Tears began to roll down the Count's sunken cheeks. "Catherine, forgive me. I forced you into a marriage I thought would be your punishment, but it turned out to be your salvation, and mine too, because it has taught me that a man's true value is not in his title, but in his heart." Catherine felt her own tears threatening to overflow. This fragile and broken man was the father she had loved, before pride and desperation had hardened him. "I forgive you, Father," she whispered. "And I hope you can forgive me too for the obstinacy, for the pain I caused with my rejection of Pemberton." "Forgive you?" Edmund sat up with difficulty. "My daughter, your rejection of Pemberton saved our family's honor. After you left, terrible news came about him. Fraud, cheating at games, debts to dangerous moneylenders. He is ruined and exiled in Ireland, fleeing from his creditors." The silence that followed was of peace, not tension. Catherine felt as if a weight she had carried for months finally lifted from her shoulders. "Will you come visit me from time to time?" asked Edmund weakly. "Of course, Father, and I want you to know our plans. William and I are going to open a school." They spent the afternoon conversing, sharing dreams and asking mutual forgiveness. When they finally said goodbye, Catherine knew she had recovered not only her father, but peace with her past. As the carriage took them back home, William took Catherine's hand. "How do you feel?" "Free," she replied, looking at the golden fields that extended toward the horizon. "Completely free for the first time in my life." But that same night, an unexpected letter would let them know that their story was just beginning to be written in the pages of English history. 8 months had passed since the reconciliation with her father, when Catherine awakened one spring morning with a certainty that filled her with indescribable joy. She carried life in her womb. William immediately noticed the special brightness in her eyes when she came down for breakfast, radiant with the secret she had just discovered. "What has put that mysterious smile on your face?" he asked, serving tea in the porcelain cup they had bought together at the fair. Catherine approached him, took his calloused hands in hers and placed them on her still flat belly. "We have a student who will arrive at our school before all the others," she whispered. William looked at her without understanding for a moment, until comprehension illuminated his face like dawn. "A baby," he murmured, with voice broken by emotion. Catherine nodded, and William lifted her in his arms, spinning with her through the kitchen, while both laughed and cried at the same time. The Whitmore Vale School had opened its doors 3 months earlier, in January 1842, with a modest but significant ceremony. The first students were only 12, 6 sons of local farmers and 6 young people from merchant families in neighboring counties who had heard about the innovative educational program. Catherine taught literature, history, and modern languages in the mornings, while William directed the blacksmithing and carpentry workshops in the afternoons. They had hired Miss Eleanor Walsh, a young teacher from Bath, to teach mathematics and sciences, and master craftsman Johann Müller, a German who had come to England with advanced metalworking techniques. What made the school unique was not only the combination of academic studies and artistic trades, but the philosophy that guided it. Students, regardless of their social origin, sat together in the same classrooms, ate at the same table, and worked side by side in the workshops. "We are creating a small revolution," Catherine had told William one night, while reviewing their students' essays. "These young people will return to their homes with a completely different perspective on the value of work and human dignity." And she was right. Letters from parents arrived constantly, some expressing surprise at the positive changes in their children, others requesting places for younger siblings or nephews. But the moment that had most excited Catherine came when they received an unexpected visit. Harold Whitman, the London merchant who had discovered William's talent at the Yorkshire Fair. "Mrs. Fletcher," he had said, removing his hat upon entering the school's main hall, "I have come not only as an admirer of your husband's work, but as an observer of something much more important. What you are doing here transcends education. You are changing the way England thinks about talent and merit." Mr. Whitman had brought with him something even more valuable than praise, a proposal from the Royal Academy of Arts of London to exhibit the works of Whitmore Vale's most talented students in a special exhibition on art and industry in New England. "This is extraordinary," William had murmured, reading the official letter. Recognition from the Royal Academy for a school that's barely 3 months old. Now, with the news of the baby on the way, Catherine felt that her life had reached a fullness she had never dreamed possible. That afternoon, while they walked through the fields where the first students practiced sustainable agriculture techniques with Mr. Hartwell, Edmund's younger brother, who had come to teach land management, William suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" asked Catherine, following his gaze toward the horizon. "Nothing bad," he said with a smile. "I was just thinking about how strange destiny is. Your father thought he was giving me a proud woman to humiliate. He didn't know he was giving me the perfect companion to change the world." Catherine leaned against him, feeling the strength of his arms around her and the new life growing within her. "Do you think our child will be proud of what we've built?" William kissed her gently on the forehead. "I think our child will grow up in a world where love and talent matter more than titles and inherited wealth. And that, my dear Catherine, is the best gift we can give him." As the sun set over Yorkshire, painting the sky with tones of gold and rose, Catherine and William contemplated their school, where the lights of night classes shone like terrestrial stars, illuminating the path toward a brighter future. Could their small educational revolution really change the destiny of an entire nation? The letter arrived on paper with royal seal, carried by a messenger dressed in the colors of the House of Hanover. Catherine read it 3 times before believing what her eyes showed her. Her Majesty Queen Victoria formally requested to visit Whitmore Vale School during her tour of northern England. It was October 1842, and Catherine was in her 7th month of pregnancy. Her figure had rounded elegantly, and William cared for her with a devotion that moved all who knew them. The school had grown to house 40 students, and its educational innovations had begun to influence other institutions throughout England. "The Queen," murmured William, reading the letter over Catherine's shoulder. "Our Queen Victoria wants to visit our little school. Apparently Prince Albert is particularly interested in our applied arts programs," Catherine explained, pointing to a specific paragraph. "He has heard about the fusion between classical education and artisanal training, and believes it could be a model for modernizing education throughout the empire." The news ran through Yorkshire like March wind. The royal visit was scheduled for the first week of November, and the entire region prepared with patriotic fervor and genuine curiosity. Catherine and William worked tirelessly to prepare the school. Students rehearsed demonstrations of their skills, workshops were organized to the last detail, and a special exhibition of the best works created during the previous year was prepared. The morning of the visit dawned clear and cold, with that golden autumn light that made everything seem touched by magic. Catherine had dressed in a dark blue silk suit that discreetly accommodated her condition, and wore a silver brooch that William had forged, especially for the occasion. The royal entourage arrived exactly at 10 in the morning. Queen Victoria descended from her carriage with the grace that had made her famous, followed by Prince Albert and a retinue of courtiers and officials. Catherine made a deep curtsy, feeling strangely calm despite the magnitude of the moment. "Your Majesty," she said with a clear voice, "it is an extraordinary honor to receive your visit at our humble school." The Queen, younger than Catherine had expected, studied her with intelligent and penetrating eyes. "Mrs. Fletcher," she responded, with a voice that, though formal, had a hint of genuine warmth, "we have heard fascinating accounts of your work here. We are particularly intrigued by your methods of social integration." Prince Albert, tall and distinguished, addressed William with evident interest. "Mr. Fletcher, is it true that your students produce works that rival those of traditional master craftsmen?" "Your Royal Highness," William replied with respect but without servility, "our students learn that excellence knows no class barriers. When natural talent is combined with appropriate education and dedicated work, the results can be extraordinary." The visit lasted 3 hours. The Queen and Prince toured every classroom, observed demonstrations in the workshops, and conversed extensively with students from different social backgrounds. Catherine noticed how Victoria paid special attention to the interactions between the young people, clearly impressed by the natural harmony that existed among them. The culminating moment came when Thomas Hartley, a farmer's son who had shown exceptional talent for sculpture, presented a piece he had been creating for months. A bust of Queen Victoria herself, carved in marble with precision that would have honored Renaissance masters. The Queen contemplated the sculpture in silence for long minutes. Catherine held her breath, wondering what the monarch would think about being portrayed by a young peasant. "It is extraordinary," Victoria finally murmured. "It captures not only the likeness, but something deeper. How did you learn this technique, young man?" Thomas, nervous but determined, explained how he had studied classical treatises with Mrs. Fletcher while learning practical techniques from visiting master craftsmen. "I see," said the Queen, turning toward Catherine and William. "Here you are creating something completely new, not only educating different social classes together, but demonstrating that true talent can flourish in any soil when provided with adequate cultivation." When the visit came to its end, the Queen addressed Catherine and William once more. "Mrs. and Mr. Fletcher," she said with royal solemnity, "what you have achieved here transcends education. You have demonstrated that principles of merit and talent can transform not only individual lives but society itself." She paused, looking toward the students who had gathered respectfully in the main courtyard. "We have decided to grant Whitmore Vale School royal patronage. From today it will be known as the Royal Whitmore Vale School and will receive support from the Crown to expand its model to other regions of the kingdom." The silence that followed was so profound that Catherine could hear her own heartbeats. Then, as if a dam had given way, students and teachers burst into cheers that extended throughout the property. As the royal entourage departed, Catherine and William remained standing in the courtyard, holding hands, contemplating the future that had just opened before them like an infinite book of possibilities. "Can you believe it?" murmured Catherine, one hand on her belly where her child moved as if celebrating too. "I believe," William replied, "that we just witnessed the moment when our small experiment became something much bigger than us. Could they have imagined that their forced marriage would change not only their lives, but the course of education throughout the British Empire?" 9 years had passed since that November day, when young Lady Catherine Hartwell had rejected Lord Pemberton's proposal, not knowing she was taking the first step toward an extraordinary destiny. It was a May morning in 1851, and Catherine found herself in the Whitmore Vale garden, watching her 3 children play among the roses that William had planted with such love years ago. Margaret, 8 years old, had inherited her mother's chestnut hair and her father's blue eyes, along with an insatiable curiosity that led her to ask questions that often surprised her teachers. Edmund, 5 years old, already showed his father's skilled hands and spent hours in the children's workshops they had added to the school. Little Rose, only 18 months old, climbed through the gardens with the determination of an explorer, always under the protective gaze of Mrs. Davies, who at 70 had found new youth in caring for the Fletcher children. The Royal Whitmore Vale School had expanded beyond their most ambitious dreams. 3 additional buildings now housed 200 students from all over England and several European countries. Teachers from France, Germany, and Italy arrived regularly to study their methods, and Catherine had published a series of articles in the Edinburgh Review that had influenced educational reforms throughout the empire. William had been named Royal Master Craftsman, a title created specifically to recognize his unique contribution to technical education. His former students had established similar schools in Manchester, Birmingham, and London, creating a network of institutions that was transforming the way England thought about talent and merit. "Mummy," Margaret called from the garden, "is it true that before rich and poor children couldn't study together?" Catherine smiled, remembering her daughter's innocence, who had grown up in a world where such distinctions seemed as natural as they were absurd. "It's true, dear," she replied, approaching to sit on the stone bench where William had carved the names of the entire family years ago. "There was a time when people believed that birth determined a person's value." "How silly!" exclaimed Edmund, looking up from the iron butterfly he was trying to create following his father's techniques. "Tommy Harrison is the best in mathematics in the whole school, and his dad is a baker." William appeared at that moment, coming from the workshops where he had been supervising advanced students on a special project, a series of commemorative sculptures for the Great Exhibition of London, where the Royal Whitmore Vale School would have its own pavilion. "What are my favorite philosophers talking about?" he asked, kissing Catherine's forehead before sitting beside her. "How about how the world was before Mommy and Daddy changed it?" said Rose with the seriousness of her 18 months, provoking laughter from everyone present. Catherine looked at William, finding in his eyes the same mixture of love and amazement she had seen in them since that first declaration of love by their hearth. "We didn't change it alone," William said softly. It was changed by your mother's courage to reject a marriage she knew was wrong, the wisdom of an aunt, who recognized true love when she saw it, and all the students who have passed through these classrooms with hearts open to learning. That afternoon, after the children had been taken to their music lessons with the new Italian teacher, Catherine and William walked through the cemetery where both Catherine's mother and William's parents rested. They had established the tradition of visiting them on each anniversary of their marriage, thanking those who had not lived to see the flowering of their love. "Do you think they're proud?" asked Catherine, placing fresh flowers on her mother's grave. "I think," William replied, taking her hand as he had done thousands of times in these years, "they are amazed to see how love can transform even the cruelest punishment into the most extraordinary blessing." As they walked back toward their home, where a letter from Queen Victoria awaited them inviting them to present their educational model in Paris before an international congress of educators, Catherine reflected on the strange beauty of destiny. Her father, who had died 2 years earlier, reconciled and proud of their achievements, had believed he was punishing her. Lord Pemberton, now permanently exiled and ruined, had thought he was humiliating her. But destiny had other plans. "William," she said, stopping to look at him under the golden light of sunset, "do you know what's the most important lesson we've learned in all these years?" "What?" "That true love cannot be forced, but neither can it be prevented. It finds its way even through the most adverse circumstances, and when it does, it has the power to transform not only the people who experience it, but the entire world that surrounds them." William kissed her then, with the same tenderness of their first kiss as husband and wife, but enriched by years of companionship, mutual understanding and love, deepened by each challenge overcome together. As the first stars began to appear in the Yorkshire sky, Catherine and William Fletcher entered their home, where Mrs. Davies had prepared dinner and where their children would soon wait for them with stories of the day and plans for tomorrow. They had begun as strangers united by punishment, had grown as companions united by respect, and had flourished as lovers united by the passion to create a better world. Their story, which had begun with tears of humiliation, continued to be written each day with laughter of joy, shared achievements, and the unshakable certainty that, when two souls truly meet, they can move mountains and change the course of history. The marriage that had been conceived as punishment had become the most beautiful love story that Yorkshire had ever known, and its legacy would continue to inspire future generations who would learn that a person's true value is measured not by their cradle, but by the nobility of their heart and the dedication of their hands to create beauty in the world.